This is the Quality Grind podcast presented by Medvacon. Conversations that go beyond compliance. Sharing insights geared toward helping you navigate the everyday grind of regulated life science industries. Here are your hosts, Joe Toscano and Mike Kent.
Welcome to The Grind, everyone. Mike and Joe back with you here to continue our discussion of training. Today, we want to continue that discussion with a few more strategies and quick wins that you can implement now that'll really help you continue to move that needle. Joe, what were some of the most salient points from our discussion in episode 1 that'll segue us into being able to identify some additional strategies for folks?
Well, thanks, Mike. As you know, the first time we had the conversation around training, what we were trying to do is just kind of provide an overview, provide some, insight and tips that could help individuals get their training program on track if they're having some challenges, or even if they have a great program, maybe another approach that can make it even better and integrate it, more so into the organization and have it more of the culture of, how training should be utilized and implemented and the great positive results that, it can foster from that. Some of the things we, covered, as you had mentioned, involving leadership, getting them to participate, aligning with their goals and the mission for the company, and making sure that everybody is, on the same page. Those frontline managers, the pivotal, role that they play in not only ensuring that they know training the best of all, but can coach to it, can implement it, can make sure that people are utilizing it effectively in order to get the impact that was needed. And then, the frontline employees, ensuring that they're using those skills, practicing those skills, and improving in their job function that training is being implemented to accomplish and really have an overall impact on the organization's success. And again, we talked about training is everybody's responsibility. Whether you have a title that says you're a trainer or not, everybody should be looking at better ways to implement it, improve it, to conduct it, just so that it becomes fun, exciting, something that everybody looks forward to versus something everybody has to do. So that's what we tried to do, in our first conversation around this, is just provide some guidance and things that we see on a regular basis where we're brought in to help. In this episode, I think we can get more involved in regards to specific and other tools and things of, how do we measure this? How do we kick it off? What things can be done in order to make sure it's effective? And that'll kind of evolve as we're, talking back and forth here. But, I think this is kind of like a part 2 to that first, conversation where we can provide, a little more significant guidance and help in order to achieve the results everybody's looking for.
The one thing that comes to mind as the first question that I think everyone should be asking about any sort of training program, regardless of where they're experiencing it from, is what problem is this training intended to solve or help mitigate? Now, if it's a broken process, if it's improving a compliance or reducing a compliance risk, if it's improving the efficiency, those things might be obvious. But if it's reading a procedure or if it's hands-on training, there may be 2 different answers to that question of what problem is this training helping to solve or mitigate. And that can be a really good gate in order to determine whether or not the training is actually relevant and whether it's relevant right now. So relevance at the forefront of anything we're talking about related to training is of key importance. If it's not relevant to what the individual is doing either in the moment or soon after that training takes place, chances are it's not going to be viewed as valuable. The individual is not going to be as engaged as they would be because they don't understand or see how it is going to help them in the short term. So would you agree that that is one of the first and foremost things that we should be addressing when we look at training?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's really 2 key questions that everybody should ask when looking at their training programs. And this will help evaluate, one, is it necessary to the specific person it's being taught to, right? And number 2, not only is it necessary, but what is it going to accomplish? And if we focus on the what is it going to accomplish, there's two additional items. The first of which is what should they be able to actually do with what they're being taught? If you can't answer that question, you have a bigger problem, right? You need to be able to state to someone, look, you're going to take the time, effort, and energy, and this is what is going to happen when you accomplish or finish the program. The second thing, quite honestly, what is that understanding they should know or have? Right? Some skills are taught through training so that you're able to do something better. Another thing is just to understand a process, procedure, regulation, etc. But you should be able to define either the skill they should walk away from and be able to practice with, or the understanding of the concept that they're being taught so it can be applied as they're doing their work. If you can't define either one of those effectively, you need to look at one, is it important to do? And two, if it is important, am I approaching it the right way in order to accomplish those goals?
One of the things that we find an awful lot in this industry, especially with new hires that come into an organization, is they're handed a list of 120 SOPs and asked to read all of them because at some point they may be doing that task. They may not do it for 3 months, 6 months, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it happens to be.
Or ever.
Ever. Exactly. And so there's a tendency on the part of frontline managers, I think, to take the contingency planning, and that's what leads to that list of 120. Well, they might, or I hear this all the time, and I hear it with clients, and I heard it as a training director all the time. Well, it'd be nice for them to know that how we do this process or have an overview of this process. There's a lot of different ways that you can provide that information. And I would encourage people to get creative about how they present that information when they're doing that so that the training becomes relevant, it's timely, and you get the engagement for the time that's spent rather than having someone just go through 120 procedures to check those 120 boxes so they can start their job.
And Mike, look, a simple solution to that, and if it is a requirement that they have to read all 123 SOPs, is then reorganize and categorize them, right? From most critical and must know to least important, and then build in a training function or schedule where the critical ones are done up first, and they're broken out in segments where people can take the time to understand and digest those, especially the ones that are critical. And then over a time period, they can get through the rest. If somebody needs to digest 123 SOPs overnight, we both know it's not going to happen. Nothing's going to stick. They're not going to understand it. And the whole purpose of having them do that is to avoid a problem that is going to occur anyway, regardless if there's a check mark there or not, right? So just do it differently, reorganize it, categorize it, schedule it. Yes, it may have to still happen over a period of time, but break it up so it's not all at once so they could focus on what's most important and what's nice to know later versus everything being so important because we always know that it's not.
You just said it. It's the key. We think that something is critical in the moment, and sometimes it's well, I don't want to have to think about this later on or go back and check if I need to quickly assign that person that particular task. What I hear all the time is, I know they've been trained already, which means the box has been checked, which means they have permission for the procedure to do the tasks, but does that mean that they're going to be competent in performing it in that moment? And that's an everyday challenge that we'll spend some time trying to digest and give some additional strategies to in follow-up episodes. But I think it's important for people to start asking those questions. And as you say, take a look at the structure a bit differently and build that into the process so that what you're doing is as effective and efficient as possible.
Absolutely. If you're not asking questions about the programs that you're having people go through and you're not easily able to answer those questions in terms of impact or knowledge, it's not a worthwhile program and it needs to be rethought. It might be a critical component or critical training that needs to take place, but it can be done then differently if the goals are not clear in the end results. And we spoke about this briefly offline. There needs to be a way to measure it, right? Most training is measured that it was done. They checked the box, it was conducted. We have documented proof that we had this course and these things were read by this time and this date. So we have accomplished what we're after. Yeah, that's a bunch of nonsense, right? Because reading something and comprehending something are two very different things. So, how do you measure the fact that this was actually absorbed, that it was understood, that it could be utilized? And those are the more important measurement tools than just checking a box. There should be a methodology just to say, and it's not an I gotcha. It's maybe, it's not clear enough to be understood in the manner in which it needs to be, and it needs to be explained better. But can people, recite back or show that they understood what they just went through, can utilize either that knowledge or that skill? And because of that, you actually have an improvement that you can demonstrate over a period of time. And if we measure that way, now training's really powerful and impactful. When we check a box, it's meaningless. It could just be said that it was done, but it doesn't mean that it had impact. And wow, what a waste of time, energy, and money.
Well, and that's where we implement tests or quizzes after many of our training courses to get a sense of.
And everybody loves them
all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, oh, we've got a 10-question quiz at the end of this, and the questions are all over the place, or they're so detailed, and we all know the horror stories around that. My point around testing and quizzing is there's a place for that, and it gives you a certain amount of information that tells you if the program was effective. The point is not to, as you said, have the box checked and we've got proof this was done. It's to instill competency and evaluate and attest to competency of an individual following a set of activities that are designed to give them that.
Look, and not to belabor this point, but, I'm not a fan of ineffective testing. Right? Don't do a test for the sake of doing a test or just to say that you did. To me, there's a lot of that, and it doesn't help. There's really two different ways to test. The first of which, if it's a skill, don't give a paper test, right? The best way to see that skill is through observation and end result, because you should see an improvement in performance if it's a skill that's an improvement over what was done before. That end result should be better by incorporating a different way to go about it. Really simple. And it takes a little time, yes. And it's not an I gotcha. It's well, did we teach it effectively? You should be asking ourselves questions if we're not seeing that skill implemented well. Was it taught effectively? Or, is the individual implementing it as they should? Or was there a baseline understanding that there should have been? It shouldn't be to get people in trouble. It should be to evaluate the implementation of the skill set that was being taught. Right. The second one is, quite frankly, can they answer situations or questions effectively based on what was learned? Yes, it could also be observed outside, but the better way is by creating a series of questions that say, hey, look, if they had to implement this knowledge, do they know where? Do they know how? Can they distinguish points because of what was just explained? And that is very appropriate. And again, it's not an I gotcha. If you're not getting good results from a lot of people in the class, let me tell you, it's not the person taking the test. It's the way it was trained to begin with, and maybe it needs to be done in a different manner. And if it's one or two, that's okay. That could be easily addressed. Again, you're not in trouble, but maybe like in school, people need a little extra help with something in order to understand the concept that's being taught. I think if that approach is taken, if it's implemented in that manner, then you're going to get the impact and the results that the organization really wants. That time, energy, and money that was invested in order to conduct the training is now well worth it, because it's going to pay itself 10 times more so on the other end. And that's an area that if people were just to look at it a little differently, wow, what a huge impact it could have.
Knowing the people and how they're going to apply, or how you want them to be able to apply the information that they've learned or the skills that they've acquired, is incredibly important. So you have to have that as part of your initial process, where We're talking about aligning training initiatives with senior leadership goals, functional area operational constraints, and the actual environment in which the person will be performing this task with the actual tools that they'll be using, whether that be a procedure, a computer system, materials, equipment, etc. These concepts apply to really any type of training that you're developing or implementing or evaluating.
Does it accomplish what you're looking to accomplish? Is the program structured in such a way that it's going to either provide the skill set that people can now utilize, implement, and practice, or does it provide the knowledge base that's really necessary for them to perform their job function, right? Really depends on who the audience is here that we're going to. Um, does the training provide what's needed to get to the end goal? Is it going to help the company achieve its mission, better performance, product safety, whatever the criteria is? And if it does, you should be able to measure that over a period of time. There's short-term measurement where you could check to make sure that either skills are being implemented, practiced, and used, or knowledge can be applied where necessary. And then the organization should have, my favorite word, accountability, right? Where you could actually show that that investment of time, energy, money that was made and all the people involved and the hours for teaching and attending actually have a net positive result to the company. And if that's the case, then the training was more than worthwhile to do and should be repeated and improved often. Those are some things, in addition to what we've covered the last time, that if implemented could have a huge positive impact.
Very much so. And that constant communication that you talked about in episode 1 really starts that open environment and that collaborative environment. If we mix in some curiosity and some willingness to self-check and continue to ask ourselves questions about, is this really doing what we think it's doing? Do we have the data and information to support that? And how could it be better based on feedback that we get, based on reactions that we get, based on the results that we get?
Based on our experience, I think, the best way to look at this is the companies that do this well and the groups that are really successful at implementing training and ensuring that it's effective, it's built into the company's culture, right? Everybody from the executive level down is vested in it. There's clear communication as to the direction the company is heading, the things that are required in order to ensure that direction, and that everybody is successful. Those are the model companies in this space that do this extraordinarily well. Where people tend to fall short is when training is treated as a function and a checkbox. And I know I keep saying checkbox a lot, but unfortunately, that's the way it's perceived. It's not important to the organization, and a lot of people see it as a waste of time. It's something we have to do versus something we should be doing and be excited about doing. And it doesn't meet the criteria because it's not built into the fabric of the company in order to have it be an additional tool to achieve good results. It's more of an afterthought, a dumping ground where, you send some people that maybe aren't ready for other positions. We'll put them in training for a while. Maybe that'll help. It's not what it should be. It should be a place that everybody touches, works in, is proud about, and really incorporates that opportunity throughout every process of the company. To me, quite frankly, if you can do small steps which become the fabric, it's no longer work, right? It's just common practice like a lot of things are. And that's really the goal here. What changes can be made? What approach can be done? How can we fine-tune things a little to make people really interested in what needs to be accomplished versus has to be accomplished? And with that change over time and everybody's involvement and participation, you slowly become an organization that embraces it and it's part of the fabric of the company. And then it's not work anymore. It's just how we do things, but it's all got to start somewhere. And, when we're brought in to fix problems, what I just described is the problem. It's just a thing that has to get done, and let's check that box and get it out of the way. And where we see success is when we're able to help an organization change that mindset and implement some small things that make really big differences.
And we all know that we have to get things done and they have to be done within a certain time frame. But if we can start asking more how questions and more why questions, that starts the dialogue. And not from, as you've said, an I gotcha point of view, we're looking to trap people, but genuine, authentic curiosity. One of the strategies that a manager had used very effectively is when they left for meetings, maybe it was in another building on campus or down the hall or whatever it happened to be. If they got the chance to, and oftentimes it just created the chance, they would leave their office 15 to 20 minutes early for that meeting, and they would swing by one of the laboratories or one of the manufacturing areas, or take the long way around to the conference room where the meeting was going to be held, with the intent of having a short conversation with folks and just said, how are things going? Tell me about what's going on here. Or, are there new challenges, or are you finding that things are better in this particular area? And I realize I'm generalizing, but hopefully the listeners and viewers get the idea that just being willing to be out there and show your presence and be curious and have those informal conversations. It doesn't have to be an hour-long meeting called an Outlook in a conference room to be effective to get that information. That can go a long way towards building that fabric into the culture, because then it does just become, well, this is how we communicate.
And that makes for a better leader and manager, right? They're willing to go out and have those interactions, collaborations. They're not just working with their inner circle who's going to tell them many times what they, want to hear, or only be told what, they want them to know, etc., right? This gives them a chance to interact with all levels of the organization, understand better what's happening and how they in their role can maybe help or influence, even solve some problems, because maybe it's a much bigger issue than what they had heard it is, or maybe there's an aspect of the problem that wasn't fully explained before. And, I've always been a big fan of the more that leadership can interact with different levels of the organization, the best position they are in order to influence, help, and make impact in those areas. It makes it just for a good leader who takes that time and energy. Now, again, very busy people, they have a lot going on, but as you described, can you leave 5 or 10 minutes earlier ahead of time and swing by an office and say hello, or check in on an area, or just be seen? Sometimes, oh my God, look who's here. We never see that level of leadership or management in this space. And it goes a long way. It makes people now feel like they're part of something bigger. Right. And again, we're getting a little bit away from training, but it all implements and plays into that as well. But it's the perfect methodology, right? Or, catalyst to get involved and implement change and interaction and conversation. It just leads, because of the function of training, a lot of barriers being broken and people interacting at levels that maybe traditionally in the day-to-day job they don't. And, for me, that's what makes it exciting. That's why, again, with the best companies that are successful with this, you could see it across the culture of the organization. Everybody's involved. The ones that aren't good at this just don't take it seriously, and they're really missing out on an opportunity for improvement. And again, it's great for us because then we're brought in to help, but it would be nice to see that people don't need that, right? And other areas can be focused on where, more help is really needed versus, some minor changes that can just go a long way.
Those quick conversations by a trainer who's willing to get out there in the environment as well and make themselves seen and connect with people, asking questions, gaining feedback and perspective, that then gets funneled back into the programs. It gets funneled back into the operational improvement flows, and everything starts to snowball as well. What better opportunity for people to connect with someone who they recognize, who they're familiar with, who taught them something and that hopefully helped them do their jobs better. But that few minutes of follow-up to say, "Hey, how are things going? Is this working for you? Were there things about the training class that could have helped you now that you've been doing this for a little while that we can improve that training or that I can help you better understand now that you're trying to apply this?" So I would encourage folks that are training others to spend some time, carve out that time because it's really, really important. And the benefits of doing so are going to far outweigh most other things that you may be able to do from improving the organization's overall perspective. Um, get involved and it's an amazing way to improve things.
So, Mike, one other area that is a bit underrated, sometimes it's required. Again, there's a difference between companies that do this well and those that don't. Is the pre-work required prior to some type of training program? Now, I know everybody's kind of moaning, oh my God, pre-work, like now you're testing us and there's pre-work and there's accountability and I don't want to listen to this anymore, right? And that's not what it needs to be. Pre-work should be an understanding of, hey, if there's some things you should learn before you come in, please take the time to do so because it's only going to make it more effective. But it should also include this is what we're hoping and why we're going to take time from your schedule in order to do it that we want you to achieve by the time you leave. And if we don't, you need to let us know, right? But people should have a basic understanding of this is what we're looking to do. This is what we need you to do before you get here. And if you can do these things, it's going to be really impactful and time well spent. Again, good companies have expectations around it. Work is required. It's checked to make sure it was done. There's a baseline taken sometimes when things are started. Again, it's not an I gotcha. It's just where is everybody's level of understanding? It's not anything to be embarrassed or hurt over. But if you do have an employee that doesn't take anything seriously, then at least you know what you need to address. If people do take it seriously, now they're best prepared to take advantage of the time, away from their position in order to have the impact that's needed. But I think, pre-work is super important and the accountability around it. And again, not an I gotcha. It's a let's just make sure that everybody understands why we're doing this.
Great example and a really great point. You have a 90-minute training class set up because the first 30 minutes of that class is intended to bring everybody up to speed and align everybody on the pre-work and make sure that those prerequisites or whatever they need in order to be successful is there. You want to shave time off of your training class? Have folks spend 15 minutes on their own when they can going through that pre-work, and you avoid having to do that with everybody for 30 minutes during your training class. You reduce the time in your training, you make it much more application oriented, which means you've got better engagement, you've got better outcomes. So there's a really great strategy. I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, around how a little bit of pre-work can be important. The best person to deliver that message, in my opinion, is the frontline manager. Because let's face it, we do things that the person who holds the most influence over us, we do things for our reasons. And more often than not, our reasons are, well, I don't want to make my boss unhappy, or I don't want a bad performance review. So if I've got 3 different messages, I'm going to listen to the one of the person who signs my paycheck, who signs my performance evaluation. And so if the frontline manager says, we're going to have this training, this is what the expectation is, here's how it's going to go. These are the things that I want you, my beloved team members, to get out of this. Here's what you should come away with. You remember that challenge we had 2 weeks ago? I'd like you to bring that up during the discussion so you can work through it during the training session and get some additional perspectives on what we can do better next time. Then you're solving problems, and instantly all of those trainees, when they walk into that training class or read that procedure or do whatever, have a stake in and are more engaged in that process because the frontline manager made sure to communicate its importance, how it applies to their team, and what the expectations are around getting out of it.
So it doesn't excuse anybody from that knowledge base. Every manager is going to have touch points with their employees, and every time they have a touch point, because nobody's going a week or two without talking to their employees, they should be saying, "Hey, have you looked at the pre-work? Where are you in that? Do you have any questions? Are you prepared?" You know, and if you have those simple conversations that take a few minutes, you know what'll happen? Every single one of the individuals on your team will absolutely have done that work prior to going to the training course because they're not going to want to tell you they didn't, right? For the very reasons that you described. So it's really important. And we always said, and going back to our first episode on this, that manager, that leader is really an important function. They need to know it better. They need to hold people accountable. They should be able to ensure that things are being implemented that are taught. And if work is required ahead of time, that there's an understanding so that their team, once they accomplish that training, can do the very best job possible. And if they do those things, they'll have tremendous impact on the organization. And if they don't do those things, then it's a different situation that'll be addressed in a different way. But it's a great way to kind of see, hey, who's on board, who really wants to see the organization improve and get to where we need to be versus this is the pre-work. We hope you do it. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And then nobody did it because there's zero accountability. And the training's done expecting one level of preparedness, and people are coming in far below that. So now the training doesn't have the impact that's needed. And all of a sudden it's a bad training program. And it's more than that, right? It's that accountability, that pre-work, those brief conversations to check in that could have a tremendous impact. And again, training is being provided for a reason. It elevates performance. And that elevation in performance means, more successful organizations, safer products, less waste, more impact. Those are the types of things that we're trying to accomplish through going through a training program.
But look, at the end of the day, a problem, an issue, a hiccup, a delay, rework, whatever that means in your part of the organization, those things are not fun, to say the least. Okay. Nobody likes them. It's a waste of time. It's hard. Everybody gets heated. It's not fun at all. And I realize that this is going to sound very father-like because I can hear my dad's voice saying it in my head as it comes out of my mouth. But if you make these types of investments and you invest in people and you invest the time to have those 5-minute conversations, like Joe said, when you have the opportunity, or create those opportunities, like we've talked about with the managers or trainers leaving for meetings 5-10 minutes early, so things going by. If you make those types of investments, what you'll find over time is you may not eliminate all the issues, but you eliminate a lot of the issues that you don't have time to deal with later that get in the way of some really serious things potentially happening that we'd really not rather talk about because I'm superstitious. And we all think, well, that's not going to happen to us. We're not going to have those issues. So we're going to, and I'm not talking about people willingly cutting corners. All right. Very, very, very infrequently does that happen. Okay. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is make the harder, tougher, in the moment decision that is ultimately the better decision now. And it will and does pay off later with, you're not going to have as many issues to deal with. You're not going to have as much rework or problems to address in the future. You want to streamline Kappa's deviations, getting rid of those things and all the time, energy, and effort that takes up. Have those 5-minute discussions with each one of your employees about improving their ability to get more out of training programs, and follow up with the training staff. Be engaged with the training staff to be an active part of that process so that they understand what you need. You're the customer. They understand what you need in order for your staff to be better at what they do. And that's the investment that will pay off in spades later on. And to Joe's point, that's what organizations that are successful at doing this, they achieve. They don't have as many problems. They don't have as many snags. They meet more milestones. They have more fun. They have better engagement and an overall better work experience. Is that too Pollyanna pie in the sky for anybody, Joe? Save me here with some practical grounding.
No, and I think if we really wanted to kind of, put this in a concise way, the organizations that are most successful here value training in the training process. The ones that don't, it's not that they don't have a value for training, but for them, it's just a function that has to be accomplished and then they could forget about. And like I said earlier, there's just a really big difference between those two. Incorporate it, make it part of your culture, embrace it. Everybody has accountability and responsibility around it. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you have the title or not of trainer, but bring ideas, give feedback, make it better, because that input just elevates it for everyone. And if the company can create a culture around that, it's amazing what it could accomplish. And if, you have a great program, there's even ways to make it better. And if you don't, then hopefully Mike and I have provided some ways that you could start looking at this a little bit differently. But, I think, Mike, just to do a kind of a quick recap, is training important, pertinent or not? You need to determine that. Are you clear on what that training is trying to accomplish? Well, people go through it and go, I get it. This is what you said it was going to be. And this is what I feel I can do now at the end of it. Does the training get you to that point? Because you might have a clear goal, but if people are confused at the end, then we need to talk, right? There's an issue here. And then you need to evaluate, right? Do some pre-work. Management can have a really positive influence in making sure that's done, and then evaluate, right? And hold people accountable. It's okay to have accountability. Everybody thinks it's such a dirty word. It's not. Evaluate appropriately. It's never an I gotcha. It's never to hurt somebody, but it does separate out the best from people that might need some, help, or maybe don't have an interest in pursuing it. And then if nothing else, as an organization, you could deal with things as needed. But there's a very simple approach, as complicated as it may sound. It's really not. It's really small changes. It's a different attitude, and the results can be amazing if they're implemented correctly.
That's, I think, the perfect message to end this episode with. There's a lot here, but it's all attainable. It's all achievable with small movement, small changes. As we've talked about before with training, this is a huge topic to try and cover all of the intricacies and all the details and all the nuances of this particular activity and this system. And we'll do much more of this as we go along, probably touching on it on a lot of our different episodes when we hit quality topics, compliance topics, things along those lines. So stay tuned for that information as we go along with more practical tips and strategies. We'd invite you to like, share, and comment on the podcast. If you have ideas or thoughts that we've sparked that you think you want to share that could benefit our audience, please do that. We want to communicate with a broad audience of folks and bring about that discussion and conversation, because we know there's a lot out there and a lot of different ways to do this. So please engage with the show. That would be great. We look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of The Grind.
If Medvacon can help you and your organization, we're happy to do so. We specialize in the following areas: quality and compliance, validation and qualification services, project management, tech transfers, general and specialized training programs, engineering services, and talent acquisition. If you have general questions as well, feel free to give us a call at any time. We can easily be reached at 833-633-8226 or via our website at www.medvacon.com. Thanks so much, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Thank you for listening to the Quality Grind podcast presented by Medvacon. To learn more or to hear additional episodes, visit us at www.medvacon.com.